Hi there. Understanding how to do anything efficiently helps you become more proficient at it and helps it to become a more enjoyable experience. And with lots of things that we do in computers, there are lots of shortcuts like Control and C, Control and V for copy and paste, and we use them all the time. It becomes second nature. We do it without even thinking. And Lightroom has loads of these kind of shortcuts that help it become much more efficient for you to use it. So I'm going to take you through a lot of these today. So let's get going with the first one. So we're going to start off with some shortcuts that allow you to manage the appearance of Lightroom and make better use of the workspace. And the first of those are the keys F5 through to F8. So they will hide certain parts of the screen. So F5, for example, hides the module picker at the top. F6 hides the film strip with all your photos along the bottom. F7 will hide the left-hand panels, and F8 hides the right-hand panels. And you can reveal them again just by pressing those buttons, and it brings them all back. And that works in both the library and the develop modules. So I often find that when I'm in the develop module, I will close down the left-hand panel, just have the right one open so that I've got a little bit more room to work. But if we go back to the library view, then there's another option that you've got there, which is the tab button, and tab will close down both of the side panels, but it leaves open the module picker and the film strip, and again tab brings them back. So there are a few other options that are really great to use that change the appearance of Lightroom. And one of those is to go into full screen mode. So if you press F, you view whatever photo you've got selected on full screen without any of that Lightroom stuff around it. We also have a lights out mode. So if you press L, then you can view Lightroom with the lights out. Now, it's better if you're looking at a full-size picture. So if we open one of these up, and if we go into the develop module, for example, so we've got all of the sliders and stuff around the screen. If I press L for lights out, they fade. And if I press it a second time, they go completely black. So you've got a black surround to your screen. And I would suggest that this really helps if you're imagining how this photo is going to look on a web page. It gives you that view because you're not seeing all the other stuff of Lightroom around it. You've also got an option called soft proofing, which you can activate by using S as the shortcut, and that puts a white surround against it. But you can also then press L for lights out mode, and you get a big white surround it. And that will really help if you're imagining how this photo will look as a print, maybe hanging on a wall, something like that. It's much better than viewing the picture with all of that Lightroom stuff around it. Now, let's go back to the library module. And there are a few different views here. So you're viewing it at full size here. In the library, you're looking at it as a full size preview of the JPEG that's embedded in the RAW file. When you're in the develop module and you're looking at a full size picture, it's the full size RAW file. So back to the library, you can get different views. So we started off looking at the grid view, which you can access by pressing G. So nice and easy to remember, G for grid. But to get to that full scale picture, you need to press on E. And that takes you into this view, the full scale preview of the JPEG, which Adobe calls the loop view. Now that's not very useful, but I call it the expanded view because it's the expanded view of that thumbnail JPEG. And that helps you remember the shortcut to get to it, which is E. There's another view in the library which allows you to compare two photos. So if you press C, it brings up two photos side by side, which allow you to think about which one's better when you're trying to decide between two photos, whether or not to edit them. There's a very similar function to this in the develop module. So if we head over to develop, you can compare a before and after. Now, these are all raw files, so I haven't actually edited any of them. So if we change one of them, let's pick the first one, and I'm just going to change the colours a little bit so that it's really obvious that we've done some changes. So now, if I press the shortcut Y, we get a before and after view. So you can see here it's a split screen. The left-hand side of the screen is the before, and the right-hand side is the after. But you can change that. If you press Shift and Y, it separates them out into two separate photos, before and after. You can also press Alt and Y, and that will give you the top and bottom view of before and after. And then on top of that, you can press Shift and Y again, and that gives you split screen before and after. So there are 4 different ways there that you can view before and after and get to them really quickly. So let me just remove those crazy colours because I don't want them. And the final thing I'm going to show you about the appearance is to do with the information. So many of you will know this shortcut already, but if you press I, you get some photo information, and if you press it again, you get a little bit more. Press it a third time and it disappears. But what a lot of people don't know is that you can customize this information. So when I press it for the first time, I have coming up the file name, the camera settings, the camera I used, the focal length, and the lens that I used. And then I press it for a second time, I get the date, time, and photo dimensions. Now that is entirely customizable, and you get to those customizations by pressing Ctrl and J. And you get this little dialog box that pops up, and you can see here there's loads of different things that you can choose to show. So whatever's most important to you, you can pick and put into these 2 bits of information that appear on the screen. So next, we're going to look at shortcuts to help select which photos to edit. So let's go back to the grid view in the library. So press G to get back to grid view. And you can see here we've got a group of photos. There will often be many, many more than that, but this is just an example to show you. And we can demonstrate moving through those photos really quickly by pressing the cursor keys. So you can press the across arrow to get across them or back, and you can use the up and down cursor keys to move between rows. One thing that you can also do to help pick is to change the size of these thumbnail previews. So when you're in the grid view of the library, if you press the plus symbol, those thumbnail previews get bigger. And if you press the minus symbol, those thumbnail previews get smaller. So that helps you manage how you're working with these photos. Next, let's think about how we are going to rate these photos. So you can see here, under it, we've got the option to rate a photo from 1 to 5. So you can click on one of these and give it 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 stars. But that is a little bit of a faff. There's actually a much easier way, and that is just to use the numbers on your keyboard. So you can press 1 to give it a 1 star, 2 to give it 2, 3, and so on. So one thing you can do is use a shortcut that both moves through the pictures and gives it a rating. So if I go to this next one that's not been rated, and this time, instead of just pressing a number, I'm going to press Shift and that number. So if I press Shift and 1, it gives it a score of 1 and moves to the next one. Now I press Shift and 2, it gives it a score of 2 and moves to the next one, and so on. So that's really easy. You can also select photos by giving it a colour. So if you press 6, 7, 8 and 9, you can give it the colours 6 is red, 7 is yellow, 8 is green, and 9 is blue. And just in the same way we did for the numbers, if you give something a colour and press Shift at the same time, it also moves on to the next one. So if I press Shift and 6, it gives it the colour red and moves on. Shift and 7, yellow, and so on. And then there's a third way to pick photos, and that is simply to flag them to say, yes, I've picked them, or no, I've rejected them. And the shortcuts for this are really easy to remember. So P for picking a photo gives it a flag to say you've selected it. And up here in the top corner, look, you'll see you've got this photos flagged for selection. If you press X, that's a rejection. So pressing X gives it a little flag with a cross to say you don't want to edit it. Now, undoing all of that stuff is really easy. If it's a flag, you press U for unpick and it removes the flag. If it's a number, you press 0 and that removes whatever number is there. So if it was a colour, you simply press the same colour. In this case, it's blue, so 9. If I press 9 again, the colour disappears. So I recognise that there's quite a lot for you to take in here because I'm going through so many of the shortcuts. And I would recommend that the best way to learn them would just be to pick a few that you think will be most useful to you and try and make them become a habit. Then once you've used those for a while, come back and pick up a few more. Maybe write some down or come back and play the video again and keep learning that way. That's the best way to pick up these shortcuts. So next, let's talk about the shortcuts to manage your photos. And there are a few things that you can do here. So firstly, getting rid of photos that you don't want. So let's assume that this one that I've coloured red is one that I want to get rid of. So I can very simply press either backspace or delete, and I'll get the dialog that asks whether I want to remove it from Lightroom or whether I want to delete it entirely from the disk. So that'll remove it from the source folder that it's in. But there's a second way which is much quicker. If you're happy to leave the original RAW file in the source folder, you can just select the photo that you want to get rid of and click Alt and backspace, and it simply removes it from Lightroom. Straight away, no dialog box to choose. It's just gone from Lightroom, but it's still there in your original folder. Another thing you can do to manage your photos from here is rename them. So all the photos will have their original RAW file names, and if you decide that you want to call something different because you're going to print it or whatever, you can indicate that by changing the file name. And to do that, all you do is press the F2 button and it gives you a new dialog that pops up to change what the file name is. Now, if you've got a number of photos selected here and you want to change the file name for all of them, perhaps you want to tag something onto the end of the file name, you can use that and it will start from the first one in the selection and apply the same change across all of them. So here's a way to manage lots of photos. So this group of photos was just a subset of a lot of photos I took one morning, and these photos in particular were taken within a few minutes of each other. So you might have lots of groups of photos like that, and to make it easier to see the screen, you can group them together. So if I select all of these photos by pressing Ctrl and A, there's another shortcut for you. You can then press Ctrl and G to put them into a group. And you'll notice here it's stacked them together in a group. You've got the number 17, which indicates there's 17 in that group. If you click on 17, it opens them all up again. And if you click on the 1 of 17, it groups them back up again. Now, you can ungroup that if you don't want that view anymore. You can change it. And that's really simple by pressing Ctrl, Shift and G. You open up that group. So remember, G for group, but you have to use Shift to do it and Ctrl Shift to undo it, because G is also for grid. Next, we can send any of these photos over to Photoshop in one click. So you'll probably know that normally you would right click on something on the film strip, go up to editing, and then scroll down to edit in Photoshop. But that's a few clicks there. And really simply, we can get any of these photos over to Photoshop just by pressing Ctrl and E, which means edit in Photoshop. And it takes a couple of seconds, just as it would if you were right-clicking on the film strip, but it will open up in Photoshop. So there we have it, and one click got us there. Now, going back to Lightroom, we can also look at things in the Explorer window. So you can see where the source file for this photo is just by clicking Ctrl and R, and it will open it up in your Windows Explorer, or the equivalent of whatever you're using for Mac. It shows it here in the folder where it is. And then you've got all the other photos that were around that one that you can then bring into Lightroom if you wanted to. You can also press Ctrl and P for print, and that takes you over to the print module. There's another load of shortcuts within the print module, but I'm not going to go through those because not many people use them. There are also shortcuts for the other modules like slideshow and web, etc. But again, most people just stick to library and develop. And then finally, if we go back to the library module, you might want to create a copy of this photo. Loads of reasons why you'd need a copy of it. Sometimes you might want to work on 2 different edits side by side and see what's better. There's a whole host of reasons why having a copy is a great thing to do. And normally you would get to create your copy by right-clicking on something and go to create virtual copy. But again, there's a shortcut for that, as there is with many things in Lightroom, and that is just to press Control and apostrophe, and it will create you that virtual copy right next to it. So there's our copy, and you can see that it's the copy because it's appended copy 1 to the file name at the bottom there. So now let's talk about editing these photos. So if we pick one of them and head over to the develop module, which we get to by pressing D, then we can look at the shortcuts for editing. So here's one that not a lot of people know, I believe, and that is that you can rotate the photos in Lightroom. And I'm not talking about changing the angle of the photo that you do through the crop tool, because you can only get to 45 degrees through that. I'm talking about rotating it. I'm talking about rotating it by 90 degrees, 180 degrees, or 270 degrees. And many people I've seen end up taking their photo over to Photoshop, rotate it, and bring it back. And that's because there is actually no button you can click on in Lightroom that rotates your photo. You can only do this one by a shortcut. So those shortcuts are using the square brackets. So the closed square bracket rotates the photo in a clockwise direction, and the open square bracket rotates the photo in an anti-clockwise direction. So really quick, no having to move it over to Photoshop, just rotate it. You can also zoom really quickly, so sometimes you would want to come up to this top corner and click on 100% and it would take you to the 100% view, and then you go back over here and click on fit to fit it to the screen. Well, really easy, you can press either Z for zoom or the space bar, either of them take you to that zoom view. Spot removal, you can get to that really quickly simply by pressing Q. And there we go, straight into spot removal. Q to come back out of it again. We can get to the white balance picker by picking W. So here it's just popped up the dialog, and I can pick anywhere that I think has got middle grey. There probably isn't one in this photo, to be fair. But if I click away from that, the white balance tool has gone again. And I can get to the crop tool by pressing R. Now, the crop tool is one of the best kept secrets, or the shortcuts for the crop tool are one of the best kept secrets, because there are so many things you can do with the shortcuts here. So you can see with this crop tool, it's overlaid it with the composing by thirds grid. And many people would not know that there are other grids that you can apply. And that's because there's no option up here to pick any other grids. But if you press O, the letter O, it cycles through a number of different grids and goes back to eventually the composing by thirds grid. But as well as that, some of these grids are dependent on direction. So if we get to, for example, this diagonal one, there's a different diagonal one that you can get to. If you then press Shift and O, it changes the orientation of those diagonals. So then if we cycle on, we've got here the golden ratio, and if we press Shift and O, we can move the orientation of the golden ratio. And then at the end here, we've got this view that gives us different crops. And again, if we press Shift and O, it cycles through other crops. So normally when you're cropping down, you would drag one of the sides or the corners, and it maintains the aspect ratio. If you want to change the aspect ratio, you need to unlock it here. So you see this little symbol that has got the padlock on it, that unlocks the aspect ratio. But you can unlock it without having to drag your mouse over to that padlock. Just by pressing A, you see the padlock comes off, and then we can apply any crop that we want to. We can also change the orientation of the crop. So if I was to drag this down, you can see it's maintained the original aspect ratio, but if I now press X, it switches the sides of the photo and turns it into the same aspect ratio, but in portrait. There are also some shortcuts you can use when masking. Now, to get to the masking tool, you press Shift and W, and that will open up the dialog to select what type of mask you want to apply. But you can get straight to some of the more frequently used masks much quicker than pressing Shift and W. So let's just come back off that again. So press Shift and W to close mask, and we'll go straight into some of them. So, for example, if I press the shortcut K, it takes me straight into the brush mask. And then now I can just start brushing straight on. So there's no having to click to open up masking, click to select a brush, then start brushing on. You just press K and you're straight into brush. You can also press M to get into a linear gradient, and I can then just draw that straight on. I can press Shift and M to get into a radial gradient, and again I can just drag that straight on, not a problem. If I want to select a colour range, I press Shift and J. So let's see, we've got a lot of green in this photo because the bird is green. So let's select green, and there we go, straight into a colour range selection. I can also press Shift and Q, and that will give me a luminance range. So if I want to select the bright areas of the photo, I can go straight into masking just those bright areas. So there, we've really very quickly applied a few different masks just by using those shortcuts. And again, I can come straight out of the masking tool by hitting Shift and W together. And then if you want to see what a photo might look like in black and white, you can very simply just press V, and it switches the photo to grayscale. And if you don't like the grayscale, you prefer the colour version, V again, and that changes it back to colour. So these are by no means the exhaustive list of all Lightroom shortcuts, and I've stuck to the modules that I think people use the most. And if you're more interested in learning more about photo editing, you might like to check out my photo editing playlist, and you can see that here. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.